What's up, guys? Here I am with a few of my Benchmades. On the left here, we have our Benchmade model 42S. That stands for serrated. This is a legitimate, authentic Benchmade. On the right here, I have an authentic Benchmade model 51, obviously in black. And then I have in the middle here a knockoff Benchmade model 47. And that's sort of the key. The focus of the video here is this Benchmade Model 47 fake. So the big push back then was, hey, you're not getting a Benchmade Model 442 or 4X series, but you're getting a pretty good cheap knife with these knockoffs. And that was sort of the allure. You have a $50 Balisong that works pretty good. And I think there's some other threads that really beat, the differences between the two down pretty good, and there's some pretty good high resolution pictures of the differences between the two. Obviously, some people they'll all lose their mind over the cheap latch, which is cheap. The handle construction, and things like that. But I sort of wanted to focus on the viability of this knife to be your first, or not even your first, or is this something you could actually consider to be, a flipper in your collection, or just, you want to flip a knife. I think it was sort of geared towards people with a limited income that wanted something, they were looking for something decent under $100. I'm sort of going to address that. So let me go into the two problems you're going to run into. One is the quality control, obviously. This isn't a real Benchmade. You're going to have quality control issues. On mine particularly, and once again, you could or could not have this problem. You may have other problems that I don't have. They might not even be fixable. In my case, mine were fixable. It's just very rigged up, and it's not the best. So after 2 hours of messing around with this and maybe $5, $10 in washers, I was able to get this knife in a working manner. And the reason I have it like this is the actual blade itself is there's a little more material on one side than the other, and there's also a slight bend in it, it would seem. So the problem is when the knife came down, it would actually make contact with the handle. So if you look inside of here, there's actually some battle scars there from where it made contact, but it was actually unsafe and you couldn't open and close it properly. So that needed to be fixed. So there you go. That's a custom modification I had to make. That's 2 hours additional to me purchasing it that I needed to mess with this in order for it to be flippable. The next thing that's very annoying is on the top of this. I'm not going to be able to get in focus, it doesn't look like, but the top of this blade is very sharp. The edges have not been sanded down in any manner at all. It's just a flat machining across the top. So when the sides of this hit you, it sort of hurts. It's not smooth. You're not going to draw blood or anything from the safe side of the handle hitting you, but you're going to know when it hits your hand. Your hand. It's definitely not the most comfortable thing. I'm not going to do an in-depth comparison between a real Benchmade and a fake Benchmade, but on a good knife, at least one that I would like to flip. And this might be a bad example because this is worn down, so it might look sharp, but it's not. It's very smooth on the edges. So when that hits your hand, you're not going to feel those sharp edges because they've been sanded down. And this is a real Benchmade Model 51, by the way, in black. So I think as far as flipping, I'm not going to go and flip it for you, but I've played with it a few times. And I honestly think for $50, I have another one I did a video about a while ago, but this was 4 or 5 years back, about a $30 Balisong I bought. Honestly, in quality, this is, when I think about it, much better than that one. Or, I have a small sample set of maybe 1-2 Balisongs I bought in that price range. But I honestly feel like this isn't that bad in that price range. I'm sort of out of touch with the current market in under $100 price range. So I wouldn't use this as your only reference point, but I don't know. Here's another thing. Look at this. The screw's already backing out. Look at that. I gotta Loctite them. And what's interesting is it actually came with a set of Torx screwdrivers with it. I've never seen that before. It was thoughtful though, because they knew we would have to play with it to get it right. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where the under $100 market segment sort of being pushed nowadays, but it's really not that bad. And you know what I really like about it, and I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but it's nice having a Model 4X just laying around that I could use for whatever and not care about. It's fake, obviously, I know that, but it's pretty. The look is iconic, and I think it maintains the look even with the slight differences. Like the pocket clip's probably the biggest one. I mean, the latch is probably the biggest one, but it doesn't really bother me too much. And anyone who doesn't really know knives that well would never be able to tell the difference. Someone who knows knives a little bit would be able to tell, hey, like, is that a Benchmade? Because that latch doesn't really look that great. I think anyone who really knew what they were looking at would be able to tell instantly. But for the most part, it's nice to have a 4X laying around that you could just sort of not care about. And it really does flip okay. It's this is probably an out of date comparison too, but it flips better than the Bradley Kimura. This was big, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. They've actually since taken these off, and they're doing a new run soon, from what I understand. But it flips so poorly. It's actually a pretty well made knife, but it just flips so poorly that I actually prefer something like this. And I'm not going to do any tricks for you. Someone maybe has a video out there about it, but it's not bad for a $30, $40 knife.